When you're installing things on the boat, you're going to have to choose what, out of the tons and tons of options of sealants, you need to use. How can you make sense of it all? Hi, I'm Nika Waters, and welcome to the Boat Galley Podcast. Today I'm talking about marine sealants, particularly some questions you can ask yourself to decide on what the best one is to use for your particular application. Today's episode of the Boat Galley Podcast is sponsored by SpotlessStainless.com, the safe, fast, and easy way to remove rust and protect your marine stainless steel. Brush on, wait 30 minutes, and rinse off this environmentally friendly gel. No scrubbing required. Brush on Spotless Stainless, remove rust. It's that simple. Use coupon code BG20 for an exclusive 20% discount on your order. SpotlessStainless.com. Make stainless sparkle. Well, before you can sparkle up your stainless, you need to install it on the boat. And when you're looking at what to do to install it, it can be a little overwhelming. You get to choose between things like 4200, 5200, 4000, Dolphinite, TDS, 3000, Lifecaulk, Sikaflex, silicone. How in the world are you supposed to choose? Because actually, it does matter. So here are a few things, 5 questions specifically, actually, to think about when you are confronted with this overwhelming array of options. And I'm just talking today about the ones that come in a tube that need a caulk gun to apply it, because there's also epoxy and butyl, wood glue, hot glue, and multiple other options. Oh man. Okay, let's hold on. Slow down. Let's go back to the tubes. Question 1 is, where are you using this? Are you talking above the waterline or below the waterline? If it's below the waterline, you want to look to make sure that the tube says for use below the waterline. I'm not 100% always convinced that you have to have a marine product to use on a boat, but in this particular instance, when it's below the waterline, anything below the waterline, it's something that you're trusting your life with. So yeah, in this case, I'm picking a marine product and not something that I would generally buy at a big box store. Question number 2. Does this have a specific application with a specific set of instructions? We just replaced the glass in our port lights with acrylic, and the instructions for installing that acrylic specifically say to use silicone. When we rebuilt our forward hatch, it's got teak strips on top. We used the same kind of rubbery, goopy stuff that you would use on teak decks called teak decking systems. You want to read any particular instructions very, very carefully, because if they say use this particular kind of sealant, that's probably a good one to use. The third question you want to think about is, are you looking for sealant or adhesive? And generally the tube will probably say one or the other, or they'll be hyphenated. 3M products like 4200 and 5200, they have a helpful scale right on their tube that gives you a level between permanent, which is adhesion, and flexible, which is sealant. So adhesion means it's going to stick to each other. It's going to stick together. And flexible means that it's going to seal well, because remember that a boat is always moving. And so something that's flexible will hold its seal better, as opposed to something that's just adhesion. So an example on this is that epoxy is solid adhesion. Epoxy doesn't have any give or any flex to it. And so if you're putting things together with epoxy, you want to make sure that you're not going to have any flexing or movement with that. When you're talking about a sealant or adhesive, whichever one comes first on the label is a little bit like the ingredient list on a package at the grocery store. A sealant/adhesive will seal better, meaning be more flexible, than an adhesive/sealant, which will adhere more. Question number 4. What are you bonding to what? You might be bonding metal to metal, or wood to wood, or fiberglass to fiberglass. Or you might be mixing your media, as it were, bonding wood to glass, or metal to wood, or metal to glass, or like glass or plastic to metal in the case of the port lights for us. make sure that whatever goop you're using is compatible with both of the surfaces that you're putting together. The last question to really think about is which side will give up the ghost first. This may sound like a little bit of a strange question to be asking. But if you are thinking about adhesive sealant and the relative strength of it, so particularly something that's more of an adhesive, and if you're applying wood to wood, well, the wood is going to give up the ghost at the same time as the wood, meaning that if you're trying to separate the two of them, that adhesive, it's going to stick equally to both sides. If you're installing something metal onto something fiberglass, the adhesive will grab onto the fiberglass really well because the metal is going to be smoother and you can get it off more easily, but the fiberglass and the gel coat or the paint may well rip off. Certainly it will break apart and be destroyed more than the metal will. Remember that everything that you put together is going to have to be taken apart at some point. If you choose an adhesive that's too aggressive, something is going to give and be destroyed on that taking it apart when it comes time for that. Now, if you choose a compound that has less adhesion, you might develop leaks before you want to, meaning that you have to rebed it more quickly. So make sure that you understand the trade-off that you're choosing, because there is no one size fits all. Unfortunately, there's not something that's great for everything. Everything is going to have trade-offs. So one of the questions that people ask us, because we're in the middle of doing this great big refit that we're doing, is what did we use and where did we use it and why did we use it there? And basically, we asked ourselves these questions on just about everything. Where are we using it? If it was below the waterline, we were definitely making sure that the things were compatible for below the waterline. Places that needed specific applications, that had very specific applications, for instance, the glass and the teak strips, we used the things that were absolutely specifically made for that particular application. We tended to think hard about sealant and adhesive and really taking into account the idea that at some point, just about everything will have to be taken apart. The only time we used the most aggressive adhesive, which is 5200, which is permanent, by the way. Yes, it's permanent. The only time we used that was on a surface. We used it to install the cover board, which is wood to fiberglass, that is right at our deck. If that needs to come off because it needs to be rebedded, it means that the wood has been rotted beyond compare. So we knew that, yep, we're calling that permanent. We shouldn't ever have to take that apart. But everything else, we went with something less aggressive in terms of adhesion. So we used everything. We used Life Caulk, we used silicone, we used Sikaflex, we used 3M 3000, 3M 4200, 3M 5200. We used butyl tape, which is not a marine goo that doesn't come in a tube, but we used all of those things. We used Life Caulk on the boom gallows hardware, which was putting wood to metal, so it's putting our oak pieces of boom gallows into the bronze pieces that hold it in place. That's not a leak potential in terms of getting us wet, but we're trying to keep any moisture out of the wood. The only place we used silicone was to fix the new glass, quote unquote, in the port lights. Silicone is the sort of thing, if you do it anywhere else on the hull, you have to be very, very, very diligent and careful to clean up, because if any silicone residue is left whatsoever, it's going to repel any of the coatings that you may want to apply. You might not even see that there's a bit of silicone on there, but it'll be there and it will make the paint just bead right up and not apply. So silicone, I would strongly suggest you use in very, very, very limited situations. We use Sikaflex, both 291 and 291 LOT. It's got the kind of adhesion that is pretty tenacious, but it's not permanent. And we use Sikaflex to make fillets on the bulwarks. So where there are kind of right angles on the bulwarks, we wanted to put something in the corner so that the water wouldn't get trapped in there. And we use Sikaflex for that. And we use Sikaflex to install the taffrail, which was wood to wood. So installing the new taffrail back onto the knees that hold it in place. We use 3M 3000, which has relatively low adhesion. One note about 3M is that the higher the number, the higher the adhesion. So that's an easy way sort of to think about it. But 3M 3000 we used for things that we think we'll have to take apart with some kind of frequency. And we use this for large surface areas, so chain plates and hawse holes. We did use we mixed and matched. There were some installations where we did things like 3M 3000 on the basic big aspect of it, but then the fasteners were done with something a little bit more tenacious. We use 3M 4200, which is also tenacious but not particularly permanent, as in we should be able to remove whatever was installed without destroying the underlying surface. We did a lot of fasteners in 4200. It's totally good for below the waterline. We put the stem fitting on with 4200. And as I said earlier, the 3M 5200, the only place that we used that was on the cover board. During this refit, we've had way too many times where we've been trying to remove things that had been put on with 5200, and we wound up having to destroy everything that was involved, basically, giving ourselves a whole lot more work than we would have had to do otherwise. This is one of the reasons we've been pretty careful in picking what we've been choosing to use as the adhesive sealant. There really is no one product that will do everything. And understanding what you're putting together and what you're looking for, as well as understanding things like how often will you have to take these things apart to rebed them, or if you have to take them apart maybe more frequently than you'd want to, how easy do you want to make it for yourself? So ask yourself the questions. Where are you using it? Is there something specific that you should be using? Are you more interested in permanence or flexibility? Are you looking more for an adhesive or a sealant? What are you bonding to what? And which side will get destroyed if you have to destroy something when you're taking it apart? I can't wait to share an anchorage with you when hopefully neither one of us is having to do anything, at least not at that moment, with any of the multiple tubes of goo that you can find out there. Thank you so much for listening to the Boat Galley podcast. We love hearing from our listeners. We love it when you leave us a review. We love it when you share us with your friends. And we love it when you don't forget to subscribe. Have the most spectacular week.